Recently, over on the Geek Life channel, a great toy debate was held, where different aspects of the toy industry were reviewed, were discussed, with the idea of potentially finding solutions of how we could better get toys to collectors, understanding the motives of both the companies and the consumers. Now, I can't talk about who is part of this debate because I was sent a very strict, threatening letter that if I ever mentioned this website's name again, I would somehow be in trouble and I'm never to contact them ever again. So unfortunately, we can't go into that. But I did get responses on my comment section asking me specifically, as a kind of output of this debate, how would I solve the toy industry? So I'm happy to address that. Now, I'm not saying I have phenomenal cosmic power, and obviously if I did, and I could just change anything I wanted to, well, that would obviously involve magic. And we can't just do that. We can't just make things exactly the way we want. We have to take into account that we're part of the real world, and there are actual business factors that go into the production of toys. But that being said, in context of the debate that was recently had, I can still offer my perspective. We're not going to be able to just have toys delivered in a perfect box at our door every day, because again, there's a reality check out there that we live in the real world. But I do think there are improvements that can be made. And in light of the debate, I do think solutions should be offered. We shouldn't just close that debate. So let's deduce and look a little bit about, based on what is true with the industry and what's true with business, what can be done to try to improve distribution and collections and overall happiness of the people who make toys and the people who receive toys. So first off, it's important to understand that toy product, like almost every consumer product out there, has to have a guaranteed buyer. I'm not talking about you or me, I'm talking about the person who buys the toys from the manufacturer, and that's retail. So in most business models, the retailer is the customer. And this usually in the toy industry happens at Dallas Toy Fair, where the retailers come, they see the wares, and they place orders for the year. Now, there are other models. For example, Matty Collector that I worked on at Mattel replaced the retailer directly with the consumer, allowing the consumer to support a line up front. This is also something HasLab does, where a consumer, you or me or anyone, can pre-order a product from HasLab, and if the minimum order is met, the item goes into production. Essentially, this just replaces the retailer in the model, and it's very important to have the money up front. Now, why is this? Well, when you have Target or Walmart, you're not really afraid of the accounts receivable not being there because, well, they're not going to just take the money and run. Target and Walmart are established companies, they have reputations, they have legal obligations. So the idea that they're not going to pay your accounts receivable is not a business risk. What is a business risk is you and I, because we don't have reputations or accounts receivable or usually even businesses. So there is a higher financial risk and a business risk doing business directly with the public because we're not established companies. And what the toy manufacturers are trying to avoid is a giant warehouse full of unsold product that every day costs them money to store it, or they have to sell it off cheap, and that devalues the brand. This happened with the Castle Grayskull set we did on Matty Collector, where a good chunk of the people who pre-ordered it never purchased it, never picked it up, because we didn't charge them ahead of time, which was probably, in hindsight, not a very good idea on my part. We should have, like HasLab does.
You guys, I'm going home. But Carmen, we're trying to... screw you guys.
So, when you pre-order an item from a company and you give them money up front, this is not a free loan to the company. It's just referred to as deferred revenue. It's no different than when you buy a gift card for any company. You're paying for services up front that the company hasn't earned yet, just like if you have a Costco membership or a gym membership. It's called the revenue recognition principle, and essentially it's part of GAAP accounting, where you can't recognize income, or rather revenue, until you deliver the product. You may receive cash, but it doesn't hit your bottom line until you actually deliver the service. You have a liability to do that. So that's one issue to keep in mind. The other is that you can't just combine all, say, online and brick-and-mortar retailers into some kind of super retailer like Entertainment Earth plus Big Bad Toy Store plus Dorkside Toys to form, a super company. They just don't have the buying power of companies like Walmart and Target, which are just infinitely bigger. And a good example of this is that these online retailers can't take bets on figures because then they often get stuck with figures they do, like Entertainment Earth did with their Rose Tico program, where they had to sell them off as a dozen roses for Valentine's Day at low prices. And it's a perfect example to show that these companies, because of the way their overhead works, they can't afford to have inventory problems. So they can't just buy up every collector figure. What if one doesn't do well? All right, so with that preamble out of place or as established, what would I do if I controlled the toy industry? All right, well, I don't do that, nor would I ever want to do that. But one thing I would do is I would focus retailers on best sellers. Now, it needs to be established and known that the reason that a lot of lines are at retail is because it's advertising space for the IP owners. So whether it's in aisle or it's out of aisle or it's even above aisle, the space that a brand takes up at retail is advertising for the IP owner. That's why they want things at big box retail. It's for the sales, but it's more so for advertising. So you're never going to see brands leave retail. That's not going to happen. But what could be done is first off, there's obviously going to be retail lines based on movies. So you're always going to have these at retail for that advertising reason. But the lines that aren't tied directly to movies could be massaged, shall we say, to focus more on A-list characters. Now, things like this Shang-Chi wave did a great job of having a variant of Captain America and Iron Man. They might have also benefited from having a comic book version of their main character in this wave, but that's nitpicking. What I'm really talking about is the waves that are not tied to movies need to have maximized kid appeal because they're the main customer at retail. So what I would do is all of those waves, I would basically just make them chock full of A-list characters. For example, this Spider-Man figure in the retro wave or this Captain America now go for huge bucks on the aftermarket. I would basically keep them constantly at retail. Maybe not that exact one, maybe make slight changes to the head sculpt, but if they're going for big bucks on the aftermarket, it shows collectors and kids want them. Then I would take figures that are more C and D list, that honestly a lot of times wind up on clearance, and I would move them out of retail, because this is what tends to clog the pegs. When you have a C or D list figure that after collectors have had their fill, well, kids aren't as interested, so it winds up holding up future product. And I would create an Action Figure of the Month club. All right, I know what you're saying. Wait a minute, you're just trying to pimp what you did over on Matty Collector. Well, not really. What I'm trying to do is take the best aspects of different models and combine them together. So, to exaggerate, or not exaggerate, but to extrapolate, I would create a hybrid model. So I would use things that worked for different companies and combine them together. So Matty Collector had their Figure of the Month, HasLab has their pre-buy, and Super 7 also does a pre-buy where they show waves of figures, and when you come to the table and you buy them, they will then go into production. So I think Super 7 actually has the best model right now, where they're able to take brands that wouldn't otherwise work at retail or have very limited placement, and they can offer them to collectors because the collectors pre-buy them and offer the money up front for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. So I would apply this model to lines that are sort of struggling at retail, like the Star Wars Vintage Collection. If you removed this from retail and just made this an online line and offered characters that fans really want, but you would require collectors to pre-buy them, but you would also be very open about the quotas. Maybe not the cost to make them, but by offering the quotas, it essentially puts the power right in the hands of the collector. In other words, the company will only make this figure if enough collectors pre-order it. Open it up for a window, and there you go. The retailers are still happy because they get lines and they get to billboard movies, which makes the IP owners happy, but they can focus more on the characters that sell really well to kids. And you could do, some, variants, and collectors will still be interested in this, but the focus at retail really should be on kid product. Collector product is still needed, but you can make the collector product focused on A-listers. The D-listers can be moved to online clubs. And this way, if collectors don't commit to these figures through an online pre-buy, at a minimum quota that needs to be hit that should be shown, well, now all the power is with the collectors, and if the figure is not made, there's no one to blame but the collector, if you will. Not that I'm trying to blame the collector, but it puts the power more in the collector's hands. So this is the way that I would try to solve the collector industry, by moving more online, more to pre-buys, and more to subscription models, where all of the power is in a pre-buy collector model and not dependent on retail, who can focus more on the characters that sell for kids. What do you think? Did I offer a solution that might actually be tangible? Who knows? Who knows if it'll happen? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Share this video, like this video, and we'll keep the algorithm going. I'll see you guys in the comments section and next time. Thanks for watching.